Have you ever looked at someone and seen only their uniform? Have you ever dismissed a person because of their job title, assuming their role defined the limits of their story? We draw these lines in the sand every day, creating a world of main characters and extras, of people who matter and those we consider background noise. But what if we're wrong? What if the person clearing your table, the one you don't even make eye contact with, is the very architect of the world you're sitting in? This is a story about what happens when those lines are not just blurred, but erased entirely, revealing that the most powerful person in the room is sometimes the one no one bothered to see. It began on a Tuesday, in a restaurant called The Hearth. The name was a promise, a declaration of intent. It wasn't a place of sleek, cold modernity, but one of warm woods, soft lighting, and the gentle, ambient hum of genuine conversation. The air smelled of baked bread and simmering rosemary. This was Alara's creation, every detail a sentence in the story she was trying to tell. To the world, however, she was just a waitress. Her uniform was simple, a charcoal gray apron over a crisp white shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a neat, functional ponytail. There was a quiet efficiency in her movements, a grace that went unnoticed because it was designed to be seamless. She refilled water glasses before they were empty, anticipated the need for an extra napkin, and spoke in a low, calming voice. She was, by all appearances, a perfect cog in a well-oiled machine. But she was not the cog, she was the engineer. The Hearth was her pilot project, the culmination of a decade of dreaming, saving, and studying. It was a radical experiment disguised as a cozy bistro. Her hypothesis, that a business built on a foundation of authentic human connection could be more successful, more resilient, and more meaningful than one built on status and profit margins alone. Every employee, from the dishwasher to the sous chef, was a partner in this experiment. They were paid a living wage, offered profit sharing, and trained not just in their duties, but in empathy. The menu itself was part of the design, featuring what Alara called memory meals, dishes scientifically and artistically crafted to evoke feelings of comfort, nostalgia, and belonging. This Tuesday, however, was a stress test she hadn't anticipated. Into the warm embrace of the Hearth swept a cold front named Genevieve Vance. Genevieve was not just a customer, she was an institution. A celebrated food critic and a formidable socialite, her opinion could elevate a restaurant to legendary status or condemn it to bankruptcy with a single, poison-penned review. She arrived with an entourage of two, both of whom mirrored her air of bored entitlement. Genevieve didn't walk into a room, she occupied it, sucking the warmth out of the air. Her eyes, sharp and dismissive, scanned the restaurant not with appreciation but with assessment, cataloging every perceived flaw. Her gaze slid over Alara as if she were a piece of furniture, a functional object devoid of thought or feeling. "A table. By the window." "No," she commanded, not to anyone in particular, but to the universe she believed revolved around her. Alara, who was just handing a crayon back to a child at a nearby table, approached with a calm smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Of course. Welcome to the Hearth. Right this way." Genevieve's lips thinned into a bloodless line. She hated the manufactured warmth of places like this. It felt desperate. As she was seated, her silk coat was taken, her chair was pulled out, and water was poured. The service was flawless, yet she found it irritating. It was the quiet, unassuming competence of the waitress that irked her the most. This woman, with her plain face and serene demeanor, represented everything Genevieve disdained: the ordinary, the unnoticed, the unremarkable. She was background, and Genevieve Vance always occupied the foreground. In a quiet corner booth, observing this entire tableau, sat Alastair Sterling. Alastair was a man who dealt in futures. As a venture capitalist, he didn't invest in companies, he invested in visions, in the disruptive ideas that could reshape industries. But lately, he had grown weary. Every pitch he heard felt like a rehash of the last, soulless apps, empty tech jargon, and founders who spoke of changing the world, while only wanting to inflate their own bank accounts. He was hungry for something real, something with substance. He had come to the hearth at the insistence of a junior analyst who claimed it was doing something different. Alistair was skeptical. To him, it just looked like a restaurant. Yet, he couldn't deny the feeling in the room. It was peaceful. The staff didn't seem frantic or stressed. They moved with a shared sense of purpose. And then he saw her, the waitress serving the imperious Socialite. He watched as she absorbed Genevieve's waves of disdain with an unnatural calm. He saw the way she subtly shielded an adjacent family table from a particularly loud, condescending comment Genevieve made about their unruly child. He saw her notice an elderly gentleman dining alone and pause to have a genuine, 2-minute conversation with him that left the man beaming. Alistair, a man who analyzed data points and market trends, found himself analyzing human interaction. He saw a system at work, a carefully orchestrated culture. And at the center of it, directing the flow with quiet authority, was this waitress. He leaned back, his skepticism slowly dissolving, replaced by a deep, burgeoning curiosity. This wasn't just a restaurant. And that was not just a waitress. The meal progressed as a slow-motion disaster orchestrated entirely by Genevieve. The soup was, in her opinion, a degree too cool. The bread was aggressively rustic, the wine, a vintage praised by every major sommelier, was merely adequate. With each complaint, Alara responded with the same unwavering politeness. "I'm very sorry to hear that. Let me have the kitchen prepare you another bowl immediately. I understand. Perhaps you'd prefer the brioche instead? I can certainly bring you the wine list again if you'd like to select something else." There was no defensiveness, no hint of frustration. It was a masterclass in de-escalation, but to Genevieve, it felt like an insult. The waitress's composure felt like a judgment on her own theatrics. The final straw was the dessert. Genevieve had ordered the molten chocolate lava cake, a signature dish. It was, by all accounts, perfect. But she had decided it was not. "This," she said, pushing the plate away with a flick of her wrist, "is unacceptable. It's pedestrian." Alara looked at the perfectly executed dessert, then back at the woman's face, a mask of performative outrage. "I am sorry it didn't meet your expectations, ma'am. Can I get you anything else?" Genevieve scoffed, a sharp, ugly sound. She finally looked directly at Alara, but her eyes were filled with a chilling emptiness. She wasn't seeing a person. She was seeing an obstacle, a faceless uniform. She turned to her companions, loud enough for the entire section to hear. "It's impossible to get good service anymore. You hire these people, and they're just there. They're background noise. Utterly forgettable. You can't build a reputation on forgettable." The words landed in the warm, quiet room like shards of ice. Background noise. The phrase hung in the air, sharp and cruel. A nearby table fell silent. The elderly man Alistair had seen Alara speaking to looked over with a pained expression. Alistair himself felt his jaw tighten. He had seen corporate takedowns, brutal negotiations, and boardroom betrayals, but the casual, dehumanizing cruelty of that comment struck a nerve deep within him. He watched Alara's face. For a fleeting microsecond, a flicker of profound hurt crossed her features. It was there and gone in an instant, replaced by a mask of professional neutrality so perfect it was almost terrifying. Her posture didn't change. Her hands, holding the tray, remained steady. She simply inclined her head slightly. "I will take this off your bill. My apologies for the disappointing experience." She then turned and walked away, her steps measured and even, her back straight. She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving a wake of stunned silence. Genevieve, satisfied with her performance, signaled for the check, oblivious to the fact that she hadn't just insulted a waitress. She had declared war on the very soul of the establishment, and its creator had heard her loud and clear. Alistair Sterling watched the kitchen door swing shut. He had seen enough. He had seen a leader tested under the most personal and public of attacks, and he had seen her respond not with anger, but with a dignity that was its own form of power. He had seen the quiet, unwavering strength of a founder defending her creation by embodying its core principles. The junior analyst who had recommended this place was going to get the biggest bonus of his life. Alistair pulled out his phone, not to check his portfolio, but to send a single, cryptic text to his head of acquisitions. Cancel my afternoon. I've found it. The next big thing isn't an app. It's a philosophy. Find out who owns a restaurant called The Hearth. I want a meeting. Yesterday, inside the kitchen, the warmth was a blast furnace of controlled chaos. Pans sizzled, orders were called out, and the air was thick with the energy of creation. Elara stood for a moment just inside the swinging doors, her back to the dining room. She placed the rejected dessert on the stainless steel counter. Her second-in-command, a grizzled chef named Marco who had worked for her father for 20 years, saw her face. He put down his knife. "What did she say?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Elara took a deep breath, the sterile scent of soap and hot metal filling her lungs. She didn't repeat the words. She didn't need to. The hurt was radiating from her in waves. "It's fine, Marco. She's one person with a pen that can kill us before we've even had a chance to live," he countered, his loyalty fierce. "The presentation is in 2 days, Elara. The investors read her column. They value her opinion." Elara finally looked at him, and in her eyes he saw the fire she usually kept so carefully banked. "Then we make her opinion irrelevant," she said, her voice quiet but laced with steel. "We prove her wrong not with words but with data. With results. The numbers from tonight, the feedback from every other table, the staff morale reports. That's our defense." She sees a waitress. I see a data point. A very, very loud and obnoxious data point, but a data point nonetheless. She picked up a tablet from a charging station, her fingers flying across the screen, pulling up dashboards and analytics. The hurt was still there, a dull ache behind her ribs, but she was already transmuting it into fuel. The insult wasn't just personal. It was a fundamental challenge to her entire life's work. Genevieve saw people as background noise. Elara's entire business model was built on the radical idea that no one was. Every single person, from the customer to the dishwasher, was a vital part of the composition. To be dismissed in such a way was to have her entire philosophy thrown back in her face. She would not let it stand. She worked late into the night, long after the last chair was stacked and the floors were mopped. The quiet restaurant became her command center. She collated the final figures, reviewed the qualitative feedback from the comment cards, dozens of which praised the warm atmosphere and attentive staff, and refined her pitch deck. The presentation was for Sterling Ventures, the most powerful and discerning VC firm in the country. Their enigmatic leader, Alistair Sterling, was a legend, a man who could see the future and wasn't afraid to bet billions on it. Getting this meeting had been a Herculean task. Winning him over seemed, in the wake of Genevieve's vitriol, nearly impossible. How could she convince a man like that of the value of empathy when the world's most influential critic had just declared her establishment a failure of service? She paused, looking out at the empty tables, each one a silent testament to the evening's stories. She thought of the elderly man, who had written on his comment card, "Your waitress Elara made me feel like I was having dinner with a friend. I haven't felt that way in a long time." She thought of the family with the small child, who had written, "Thank you for not making us feel unwelcome when our son was fussy. It meant the world to us." This was her proof. This was her truth. Genevieve Vance could have her opinion. Elara had the data. She had the stories. She had the heart of the hearth. She squared her shoulders, her resolve hardening from a fragile hope into an unbreakable conviction. She was ready. 2 days later, Elara stood in a boardroom that was the architectural opposite of her restaurant. It was a space of cold glass, gleaming chrome, and sharp angles, 40 floors above the city. The air was sterile, filtered, and silent. A long, intimidating mahogany table separated her from a panel of stone-faced investors. At the head of the table sat a man whose presence seemed to command the very air in the room. His eyes, a piercing shade of gray, were fixed on her with an unnerving intensity. It was Alistair Sterling. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, but her expression remained calm. She had not known he would be here in person. This raised the stakes to an astronomical level. Ms. Castillo, Alistair said, his voice calm and even. We have reviewed your preliminary proposal. It's unconventional. You claim that empathy is a quantifiable metric that can drive profit. A bold assertion. Please begin. Elara took a steadying breath and clicked the first slide of her presentation. The logo for the hearth appeared on the massive screen behind her. Good morning. My name is Elara Castillo, and I am the founder and CEO of the Hearth. For the past 6 months, I have been running a pilot project to test a new model for the hospitality industry. A model based not on luxury, but on dignity. Not on exclusivity, but on community. She spoke with a quiet passion, her voice filling the sterile room. She laid out her vision, supported by charts, graphs, and meticulously collected data. She showed them the numbers on staff retention, 0 turnover in 6 months in an industry notorious for its churn. She showed them the metrics on customer return rates, which were triple the industry average. She presented heat maps of the dining room, showing how her staff intuitively moved to areas of need. But the investors remained impassive, their faces unreadable masks of professional skepticism. They saw numbers, but they didn't feel the story. This is all very interesting, Ms. Castillo. One of the board members, a man named Marcus Thorne, interrupted. But the hospitality industry lives and dies by its reputation, by its buzz. What you're describing sounds nice, but it lacks glamour. To get the kind of return we're looking for, you need to be a destination. You need the validation of tastemakers. As if on cue, a door at the side of the room opened, and in walked Genevieve Vance. Elara's blood ran cold. Genevieve was dressed in a severe, expensive suit, holding a leather-bound portfolio. She looked surprised to see Elara, but her expression quickly morphed into one of smug condescension. Alistair Sterling spoke without turning his head. Ah, Genevieve. Thank you for joining us. For the board's benefit, we've retained Ms. Vance as an independent consultant to offer her expert opinion on potential investments in the high-end service industry. Genevieve smiled, a predator's smile. Of course, Alistair. It's crucial to have someone on board who understands the landscape on a practical level. Her eyes flicked to Elara, a spark of malicious recognition finally igniting. The hearth, she said, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on her portfolio. I remember it. I had a memorable experience there just the other night. The trap was set. The air in the room crackled with tension. Elara stood her ground, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She met Genevieve's gaze, her expression a perfect, unreadable calm she had perfected over hundreds of difficult shifts. This was no longer a boardroom, it was a battlefield. And the war was not over a business model, but over a fundamental question: what is the true measure of a person's worth? Genevieve, sensing her power, turned to the board. While Ms. Castillo's charts are charming, they don't reflect the reality of the customer experience. My visit to the hearth was, to be blunt, a profound disappointment. She proceeded to paint a picture of an establishment that was quaint but ultimately amateurish. She described the food as uninspired and the atmosphere as trying too hard. Then, she delivered the killing blow, her gaze locking onto Elara. But the most significant failing was the service. It was invisible in the worst way. The staff were present, but they lacked polish, personality, and presence. They were functional, but entirely forgettable. Just background noise. The same words, deployed now as a strategic weapon in the coldest of rooms. Marcus Thorne nodded gravely. This is a serious concern. Ms. Vance's opinion carries significant weight. He looked at Elara, his expression now one of dismissal. Do you have a response to this, Ms. Castillo? Elara's mind raced. She could argue, she could defend her staff, she could try to explain the context. But she knew it would sound like excuses. The critic had spoken. The verdict was in. She opened her mouth to speak, but before a single word could escape, a different voice cut through the silence. I do. All heads turned to Alistair Sterling. He had been silent throughout Genevieve's takedown, his face an unreadable mask. Now, he leaned forward, his gray eyes fixed on Genevieve with an intensity that made her visibly flinch. I was also at the hearth on Tuesday night, he said, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight. I was sitting in the corner booth. I saw the whole thing. A collective intake of breath could be heard around the table. Genevieve's condescending smile faltered, a flicker of panic in her eyes. Alistair, You ordered the soup and sent it back, he continued, his tone methodical, like a lawyer presenting evidence. You complained about the bread. You dismissed a world-class wine. And then you were served a dessert that my own pastry chef would have been proud of, and you rejected it because you found it pedestrian. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. And then you looked at your waitress, a woman who had shown you nothing but superhuman patience and grace, and you called her background noise. He turned his gaze from Genevieve to the rest of the board. What Ms. Vance describes as a service failure, I would describe as the single most impressive display of leadership I have witnessed this year. I saw a CEO, in disguise, testing her own systems under extreme pressure. I saw her absorb hostility and negativity without compromising her brand's core principles. I saw her protect her other customers and her staff from a disruptive element. What Ms. Vance saw as forgettable, I saw as the quiet, profound strength of a leader who doesn't need the spotlight to be effective. He then looked directly at Alara, and for the first time, she saw a glimmer of a smile in his eyes. Ms. Castillo wasn't just a waitress that night. She was the founder, the CEO, and the chief architect of the very experience Ms. Vance failed to appreciate. She wasn't background noise, she was the composer, conducting her symphony. The silence in the room was absolute. Genevieve Vance's face had gone from pale to ashen. She was exposed, her prejudice laid bare not as expert critique, but as petty cruelty. Marcus Thorne and the other investors stared, mouths agape, as the entire narrative of the meeting was shattered and rebuilt in a matter of seconds. Alara felt a wave of dizzying relief wash over her. She had been seen. Not just her work or her data, but her. The person behind the apron. Alistair Sterling stood up, his towering presence commanding the room. Sterling Ventures is no longer considering an investment in the hearth, he announced. The statement landed like a thunderclap. Alara's heart plummeted. Had she misread everything? He let the shock settle for a moment before continuing. Instead, we will be acquiring a majority stake in Ms. Castillo's parent company to fund the global expansion of the hearth concept, effective immediately. Our offer will be substantial. He named a figure that made two of the board members physically gasp. We are not investing in a restaurant, Alistair declared, his eyes sweeping across the stunned faces. We are investing in a revolution in the service industry. We are investing in a future where dignity is the most valuable commodity. We are investing in her. He gestured towards Alara, who stood, speechless, as the weight of his words settled upon her. The meeting was over. Genevieve Vance gathered her portfolio and practically fled the room, her reputation in tatters. The other investors, now scrambling to get in on the deal, crowded around Alara, their faces transformed from skepticism to adulation. But Alara's attention was on Alistair, who approached her as the commotion swirled around them. Your hypothesis was correct, he said, his voice softer now. Empathy isn't just a virtue, it's a market inefficiency. You've built a model that monetizes respect. It's brilliant, thank you, Mr. Sterling. Alara managed, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say you'll accept, he said with a wry smile. And call me Alistair. Partners should be on a first-name basis. In the months that followed, the hearth became a phenomenon. The story of the meeting, of the socialite and the CEO waitress, leaked to the press and became a viral sensation. People flocked to the restaurant not just for the food, but to be part of the story, to experience a place where every person was treated as the main character. New locations opened in other cities, each one built on the same core principles of dignity and connection. Alara, now a celebrated CEO, never lost touch with the heart of her creation. She still spent 1 day a week working a shift, wearing the simple gray apron, talking to customers, clearing tables, and listening. It was, she explained to a journalist, her most important board meeting. It was where she gathered her most valuable data. One evening, as she was clearing a table at the original hearth, an elderly man walked in. It was her father, the famous, traditionalist chef who had always been skeptical of her soft approach to business. He looked around the bustling, happy room, at the engaged staff, at the satisfied customers. He watched his daughter as she paused to help a young couple read the menu, her head bent towards them, listening intently. He walked over to her, his eyes shining with a pride he had rarely shown. "You did it, Elara," he said, his voice thick. "You built something better than a restaurant. You built a home." Elara smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her entire face. "I just wanted to create a place where no one ever felt like background noise, Dad." He pulled her into a hug, right there in the middle of the dining room. "You are the clearest voice in the room," he whispered. "You always have been." And so, we come back to the beginning. To that question of who we see and who we choose to ignore. The world is full of Elaras, hidden geniuses in plain sight, composing symphonies that we are too busy to hear. They are the janitors with the souls of poets, the cashiers who can solve complex logistical problems in their heads, the bus drivers who carry the weight of 1,000 lives with quiet courage every day. Their uniforms are not a definition, they are a disguise. The story of the hearth is not just about a restaurant. It is a reminder. A reminder that every single person is a universe of talent, dreams, and potential. A reminder that true power isn't in being the loudest person in the room, but in having the wisdom to listen to the quietest. So the next time you step out into the world, look closer. See the person, not the position. Acknowledge the humanity in everyone you meet. You never know. The person you might be tempted to dismiss as background noise might just be the one composing the music of the future. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that every person matters. Remind them that we are all main characters, and we all deserve to be seen.